This is CNBC giving us an update on what's going on. Google snatching Windsurf CEO after this OpenAI deal dissolves, and it's more complicated than just this. There's another piece to this that's outside of Google, related to cognition, the folks that are building Devon. But let's see what CNBC has to say, and then I'll give you my take. Here we go.
Google now getting aggressive in these AI talent wars, poaching the CEO and the top talent of coding startup Windsurf right after OpenAI called off its $3 billion acquisition of that startup. Deirdre Bosa has the latest in today's Tech Check. Morning, Dee.
Hey, morning, Carl. So in the cutthroat world of AI, this was a knife twist. OpenAI lined up a $3 billion acquisition only to watch Google walk off with the talent. Now, Windsurf, as Carl mentioned, it's a buzzy AI coding startup. It was deep in acquisition talks with OpenAI. The idea was to fold its tech and user base into OpenAI's expanding app layer. But then late Friday night, Google swoops in, not with an acquisition, but another one of these pseudo-acqui-hires, a $2.4 billion talent play for Windsurf's CEO and key engineers, leading to a key question here, guys. Why did OpenAI lose this deal? I'm told by a source that Microsoft loomed large. It is, of course, OpenAI's biggest investor, but Windsurf reportedly had concerns about sharing its technology with Microsoft as part of the deal with OpenAI.
Hold on. Let's listen to this part one more time. By the way, this is wildly complicated, and as I tried to explain it, I'm probably even going to get some details wrong, but there are like many degrees of separation to explain sort of how we got here. So let's hear this last piece one more time.
But Windsurf reportedly had concerns about sharing its technology with Microsoft as part of the deal with OpenAI, especially since Microsoft's own Copilot, it directly competes in AI coding. Now, of course, Google didn't have that baggage. So now those engineers will report to...
Yeah. Okay. I'm just going to maybe write a little stuff down here so I can try to capture some of these details. In particular, they're talking about how Microsoft and GitHub Copilot are sort of making this difficult. Maybe. I'm not sure. But let's keep going.
To Sundar Pichai and DeepMind, not Sam Altman. Now, this all suggests that OpenAI's entanglement with Microsoft, it's becoming more of a liability, not just as OpenAI pushes to restructure into a for-profit and raise fresh capital, but also in M&A during these cutthroat talent wars. Now, this all matters for investors because the rules of engagement in AI, they are changing. With a regulatory climate that is still unfriendly to full acquisitions by the mega caps, the path to scale isn't M&A, it's talent poaching and license deals. And that means that companies building the models and that have the infrastructure to
Okay. All right, cool. Yeah, let's keep going.
train them, they are structurally advantaged. That is harder to disrupt, despite Trump's administration's push to help so-called little tech, the startups like the ones on the bottom of your screen here, who have all sort of sold out to big tech. So the power is shifting back to, or you could say it is staying with the biggest players, the mega.
Yeah, I mean, like, let's just be honest for a second. While, I'm part of the startup space and I love startups, I also work in big tech previously. And look, when you have hundreds of billions of dollars in capital and you can acquire these startups, like with a small amount of change in the wind, that's how sort of inconsequential it is to you. Of course, big tech runs the space. So this idea that these small startups are just going to come in and suddenly just outperform the big tech, it's, I think, somewhat confused. It's not that it can't happen. It can, and it has, but it's very hard to displace these large incumbents, even if you have outstanding people, because of all the things that big tech can do to poach your people, poach you, basically stamp you out of existence because they're going to compete directly with you and they have significantly more resources, all of that stuff. So it's never, I don't know that the landscape has ever directly sided with the startups, but I do think that startups have advantages. One of them is they can be far more nimble. They have significantly like less red tape. They also can take risks and make mistakes. Whereas big tech, I mean, the ramifications of big tech making a mistake, if they do something that is egregious, they could be sued for billions of dollars because they have that much money. Whereas if a small startup like Scale or Character AI, if they do something wrong, they don't even have that much money to, yeah, to sue for litigation, and so the big targets principally stay these, near $1 trillion companies. Or on this list, I mean, Alphabet's a trillion, Microsoft is a trillion, Amazon I think is a trillion. I'm not sure about Meta, but yeah, the landscape I think is heavily tilted toward big tech.
Caps. Now, this helps explain also, guys, why Meta and Zuckerberg are spending billions of dollars to build their own models and deploy sovereign scale infrastructure. It all comes together with stories like these ones.
Yeah, I don't know about. It's strange that they keep throwing Meta into this discussion. It's not that Meta isn't competing in the general landscape of AI, but what we're talking about right now is sort of the AI coding hype wars. And some of the major players in the AI coding hype wars are Alphabet, Amazon, Microsoft, IBM. Yeah, and there's probably a couple others. So it's surprising to not see IBM here because Alphabet has a variety of things from Google. Amazon, at least historically, had things like Code Whisperer and other systems. They actually have some really interesting learned systems, so machine learning systems that do a variety of things like code analysis, stuff related to their AWS infrastructure, which I think they're not driving this as much as it appears that folks like Anthropic, Google, and Microsoft are, and potentially OpenAI, but they're definitely doing stuff. I think they're just maybe keeping things on the DL. And then of course you have Microsoft and GitHub doing the Copilot thing. So these guys here are all sort of in this coding, this AI coding hype war. But Meta is, I don't know why Meta is here. Like, I don't know what their system is that they're building. I know that they have like Code Llama, but this is, I don't know that they have a vibe coding or code assistant system like these other guys do. So it's strange that they continue to try to pull Meta in. I know that Meta is doing stuff in the general space of AI, and they are doing their superintelligence lab, and they have Jan LeCun and other rock stars in the AI world. So sure, but AI is huge, and we're just talking about the coding space. Okay, but now let's watch this again, and then I'm going to interrupt as they talk about various things to share some insight on things that they're not mentioning but are highly relevant to this discussion. Okay, let's go through it one more time.
Google now getting aggressive in these AI talent wars, poaching the CEO and the top talent of coding startup Windsurf.
Okay, so the first thing is they're saying basically that this is Google coming in and poaching, let's say Windsurf from OpenAI. This is one of the first arguments. And I'm going to bring this up and hope that I can. Oh, cool. This may work. Now we can. Okay, let me close this. we may get this to work after all. Yeah, I in my constant effort of small steps forward and always learning, I found a new app. This app over here, uh, Drawpile, and it can work on Android and on PC, and it has real-time syncing, and it was super great. The problem is you have to set up these individual hosting sessions each time, and that is not a consistent stream, and so it just keeps disconnecting. So we're back to OneNote. Maybe next time we'll get it going. Okay, so what they just basically said is Google is poaching Windsurf from OpenAI. It's far more complicated than that. So the first thing we need to understand is that Windsurf basically, as I understand it, also previously known as Codium. I don't believe that they make their own models. So let's say no LLM dev. This is just infrastructure. This is just like coding infra that they have. Now, when they first started building their system, as I understand it, yeah, maybe they were OpenAI, using OpenAI models, and then they switched to Anthropic, or maybe they were always on Anthropic. But what is a very important detail to this is they were relying heavily on the Claude models from Anthropic to do their coding system. When the deal was mentioned that Windsurf was going to go with OpenAI, OpenAI and Anthropic do not like each other. This is, I don't know how to say this. Okay, I know how to say this. It's like this. This will update itself in a second. So one of the important details here is Windsurf is going to be acquired by OpenAI. They're using the Claude models from Anthropic. Anthropic catches wind of this, and they basically say, you're not using our models anymore if you're joining OpenAI. So here's what's going on. Windsurf, Codium, going down the path of joining OpenAI. OpenAI and Anthropic do not love each other. Most of Anthropic's leadership are defectors from OpenAI. They have a lot of not love here. And so the first thing that came in to sabotage this deal was Anthropic coming in and saying, you can't use our Claude models anymore. And that's Anthropic's right, is that they're the ones that are creating the model, and they can decide who has access to it. And if they don't like OpenAI, then why would they allow their models to be used by a company that's getting acquired by their arch nemesis? And this is further compounded by the fact that, again, as I was saying, this is going to get pretty wacky with the degrees of separation. This is further compounded by, I think it's Claude Code, which is one of Anthropic's embodiments for, I believe, like a coding assistant vibe coding system. I haven't used Claude Code yet, although I hear it's pretty great. So on top of the fact that there's no love between OpenAI and Anthropic has its own vibe coding competitive product against Windsurf. And so now it's a double complexity. Before it was just Windsurf competing with Anthropic and their Claude Code. And maybe Anthropic is like, look, we're doing different things, and so they can use our model. We're going to use our model in a different way, and we'll make money off of them, and then we'll also have our own product that makes us even more money. Okay, that kind of makes sense. But now with them joining their arch nemesis, now they would be inadvertently helping OpenAI create a competitive product of Claude Code with allowing Windsurf to use Anthropic's Claude models. That makes no sense. There's no universe where Anthropic is creating Claude Code, right? And OpenAI now has Windsurf. And both of these guys are based on the Claude models. That come from Anthropic. It makes no sense for how do I move this over, I wonder? Yeah, so anyway, it essentially makes no sense for Anthropic to allow this to continue, because they would be helping one of their main competitors build a competitive product that is based off of their intellectual property in machine learning, the Claude models. So you just stamp that out. This should not be surprising to anyone. This is the first piece that as soon as this was mentioned, Anthropic came out, and there was like this article on TechCrunch or several where they were saying, like, look, Windsurf was saying, I can't believe Anthropic cut us off for the Claude models. And then Anthropic basically came back and said, why would we allow you to use our models to help our competitor, OpenAI, build a product that competes directly with our product, and you're leveraging our technology to compete with us? It doesn't make any sense. So no, don't do that. That's the first piece. When this piece came out, then it changed the landscape to make it challenging for Windsurf to be acquired by OpenAI, because now Windsurf would have to find other essentially large language model coding systems that they could use that they believe are on par with Claude. But sort of the general view that a lot of people have right now is the Claude models for coding assistants are quite good. Both Cursor and Windsurf, as I understand it, are using these as the underlying system, as well as the Claude Code. So that's three major systems that are all using this. And now if Windsurf is losing that competitive advantage, what value does Windsurf have? I mean, Windsurf has the infrastructure for their coding assistant thing, but without the models from these guys, where did those models come from? OpenAI? Well, they could have picked OpenAI's models. They didn't. So then this seems to imply the OpenAI models are not as good. So now what models could we use? Well, we could potentially try to get access to like the Gemini models, or various other ones that might exist that people have available. I'm not entirely sure what all the options are. Yeah, and maybe they could look at, I mean, now with Grok 4, there may be a coding version of those that maybe they could consider there, or there is potentially the Code Llama stuff that they could use from Meta, and I don't know the state of either of those. Okay, so that's the first piece that's changing the dynamic of this acquisition behind the scenes and complicating it for Windsurf. This then is leading to challenges, right? There's friction here. I'm going to draw like these. I'm going to change this and say, okay, we've got friction. This is uncertainty over here. And then I'm going to draw this too as like, here's the heart. These guys have your no love over here. All right. This will update in a second. So now what happens with the acquisition? Well, Windsurf is already going down this rabbit hole, and they're probably in the spot where, given they're going down the acquisition path, that people are really leaning toward that route. So if things don't move forward with OpenAI, it's sort of like find another suitor thing, rather than saying, okay, the deal's off, we'll just run separate. Now it can happen. Like I think it happened when the deal fell through when Adobe was trying to acquire Figma a couple years ago. But it can be easy that if you start heading down the path of acquisition, that you want to kind of continue down that path. Let's see if we update it here. Yes, you can see my little heart now. And there's tension here. Okay, so now we're going to go back to this. And given this information that we have on the background of what's going on with Windsurf and OpenAI, now let's re-listen to the dialogue about Google. This is actually super important.
These AI talent wars, poaching the CEO and the top talent of coding startup Windsurf right after OpenAI called off its $3 billion acquisition of that startup. Drew DeBosa has the latest in today's Tech Check. Morning, D.
No, he said that OpenAI called off the deal. That's just somebody saying words, right? Was it OpenAI that called off the deal? Could it have been Windsurf that called off the deal? Right? Like it could have been mutual. We don't know. All we know is that the actual deal didn't move forward. It started to move forward in another way, and it moved forward with Google. So the question is, why would it move forward with Google? How does that actually make sense? Well, it makes a lot of sense. The first piece is, if we look at Google and Amazon, these guys actually have some reasonable amount of love with Anthropic. And you know this because of historical investments that Google and Amazon have made with Anthropic. So let's take a look at this. Google and Amazon investment in Anthropic. All right, Amazon's $8 billion investment in Anthropic or something, $4 billion, blah, blah, blah. And here we go. Both Amazon and Google have made significant investments in the AI startup Anthropic. Amazon has invested a total of $8 billion, including an additional $4 billion, blah, blah, blah. Google has committed up to $2 billion with an initial $500 million cash infusion and further, blah, blah. Okay, so what does this mean? Well, this means that Google are friends with Anthropic. Anthropic are the ones that make the Claude models. So now, if Windsurf wants to continue to use the Claude models because it's essential to their system, which it sounds like it probably is, who could they get acquired by that would kind of keep Anthropic from banning their use of this model? Google or Amazon, because those investments in Anthropic give them some amount of control and friendliness with Anthropic. So now if Windsurf wants to potentially continue their system using the Claude models and they're acquired by Google, who's made this investment, they likely have influence now to hold Anthropic accountable to giving them their access to their model. They couldn't do this with OpenAI because OpenAI doesn't have control over Anthropic, but Google and Amazon do because of that investment. So I don't know if they're on the board, if they're board observers, whatever. They have some amount of stake in Anthropic, and so Anthropic is not likely that they're going to say, hey, I know you're an investor and you want us to grow, but these folks from your corporation that want to use our stuff are competing with us. We're not going to give you access. Nah, they're going to be friends and they're going to try to work some stuff out, right? Because they're all sort of a little bit on the same team. And keep in mind, teams are forming here. Alliances are happening behind the scenes, which should be somewhat clear. It used to be this case where team one was OpenAI, Microsoft, and GitHub. This is kind of team number one. OpenAI, Microsoft, and GitHub. And then another team is team number two is like team number two, once this updates, could potentially be something like Meta, IBM, Merly. Oh, and there's probably no, go away. Maybe Hugging Face is over here. All right. That's potentially team two. And then maybe you have team three, which is, this is where things start to get really, really murky, is you might have team three that is Anthropic plus Google plus DeepMind. And I know what some of you are thinking, which is Goju, Google owns DeepMind, so why are you listing them? Well, Microsoft owns GitHub as well. But just because they own them doesn't mean that they are all one entity. And as I understand it, there is a lot of tension and there's strong sort of siloing, at least historically there's been, between DeepMind and Google. And sort of like who's in charge. It's you've got a lot of chefs. You have a lot of chefs at Google. You have a lot of chefs at DeepMind related to machine learning. Not all chefs get along. And who's the best? I don't know. So there's definitely two large groupings of AI stuff at Google. Yeah. And on top of that, because of the investment that Google has made with Anthropic, Anthropic could be seen in a similar way to like Microsoft and OpenAI. Now, I think Microsoft has invested more billions in OpenAI, and Google and Amazon. So you could potentially also have Amazon here. Again, this is where it gets like really murky because there is some investment overlap here, but I don't know that Google and Amazon are necessarily on the same team. They're sort of too big in some sense to be on their own team. It feels like Amazon is maybe on team 4 or something, but you can see how this is getting a little murky because the investments that are happening from Anthropic are they're capturing the attention of both Google and Amazon, which, by the way, in some sense is brilliant on Anthropic's part, but it muddies the water quite a bit because who really is sort of the leader, the big tech leader in the Anthropic space? it's not super clear. For example, with OpenAI, it's very clear that it's Microsoft, and with, like, let's say with Merle, it's very clear that our binding, at least right now, is much more with IBM than anyone else. Yeah. And the reason why I have Meta over here is Meta and IBM are aligned in this open source consortium for AI. These folks over here are a little bit heavy into the open source space. These folks here are a little bit more heavy into closed source. There is some open source, and then these folks, again, it's a little bit of both. There's open sourceness, there's closed sourceness, and then Team 4. I don't know what Team 4 is, but there are more teams. Now, we were talking about the challenges that Windsurf would have being on Team 1, right? Windsurf gets acquired by OpenAI, then you have Microsoft and GitHub. Well, absolutely, right? Because now you have Windsurf. Let's just hypothesize, if you had Windsurf over here with OpenAI and Microsoft and GitHub, which is it? Is it the Windsurf coding system, or is it GitHub Copilot? And keep in mind, GitHub Copilot was using OpenAI's models, and Microsoft was sort of just keeping the two together. So the theory was at the highest level that OpenAI is building the model. GPT 3.5, I think, is where they started, and they changed it to Codex or something like that. And Microsoft is the controlling party of both this, like the king, and these are princes and princesses, OpenAI and GitHub. And so GitHub supplies the data in all the repos that you train on. OpenAI provides the model, and Microsoft is the connecting glue. So now you have GitHub Copilot come out, and then you have OpenAI coming in and saying, we're going to acquire Windsurf. And then it's like, what's going on here? We're going to have two systems that are competing head to head. Now, part of what I think is happening here is OpenAI is really good at burning bridges with people. It seems. It seems is probably an understatement. There's lots of data that I think demonstrates this. And so you have another thing where some loss of love is happening. You've got another heart that is being broken because there's tension growing between OpenAI and Microsoft. And if that's not clear, I strongly recommend you check it out and see that breakdown. This is super important because as this relationship dissolves, what happens to GitHub Copilot? Are they going to switch into other models? Now, Microsoft can do its own language models, and in fact, I think that they're doing that, and I think they're getting more and more frustrated with OpenAI, and I have lots of thoughts about that. My general take is OpenAI is doing a really good job of being the architects of their own destruction. They literally are architecting the full eradication of their company with things like this, right? Is because they created such hostility with Anthropic, then the Windsurf deal is likely not going to go through because Anthropic is not going to stand for Windsurf using their models if OpenAI acquires them. So that gets killed. On top of that, OpenAI is destroying the relationship that they have with Microsoft because they're like too cool for school or something, and they forget that, like, sure, you guys talk good talk. These guys actually make money in perpetuity. They have, like, for decades made billions and billions of dollars and are positive cash flow. They're like on the right side of the revenue line, where they're in the black rather than in the red, which means basically that they can build products, they can throw lots of money at this, and they don't necessarily need to scrounge up a whole bunch of investment money and kind of cross their fingers that they'll be able to build something that is going to generate positive cash flow. And keep in mind, like, just generating revenue is easy. Generating profit is hard. And what I'm talking about here is it's very easy for OpenAI to spend billions of dollars to stand up this infrastructure and build their different GPT models and burn billions and billions of dollars as they have in standing these things up, and then charging like $20 a month for the consumer or whatever, and then build maybe some enterprise relationships with big tech. And then what they can do for their investors is they can show that the traction is so large that don't focus on the revenue, don't focus on the revenue amount, focus on the traction. Is that what they'll do is they'll land and expand and then demand, which is, you land in a space, you expand to take it over, and then you demand more money. It's sort of like the Uber model is they came in, they cut the bottom out of the cost for ride sharing taxis essentially, and made it significantly less expensive and more convenient. And so why would you use taxis? And then once they had everybody basically using Ubers as much as they could, then they quietly and intentionally increased the price to where now Ubers tend to be more expensive, quite a bit more expensive than cabs. Why do people keep using Ubers? It's the convenience. You already have the app, you already have the account, your credit card's in there. All you have to do is just click the button. And so just do that. Whereas with the cab, like, you got to call somebody, it changes everywhere you are. This is the whole land and expand and demand type of model. It's the same thing that OpenAI is essentially trying to do, and many of these folks are trying to do, is that you don't need to show that you're actually generating profit. You just need to show that you can generate some amount of revenue, but the traction is really strong. So go for large amounts of quantity of people using your stuff, and then convince your investors to invest the billions, and that, yes, you're on the negative side, you're on the red side of the profit right now, but you'll do the price jacking once you get everybody locked, and then everything's going to be great. And you can see OpenAI is already doing that. They're saying they're going to charge like $10,000 for a full year subscription or something to like their PhD level, their super intelligent models or something. That's significantly more, like a jump from $10,000 a year, which I think is what they were looking at charging. Let's actually look this up. So it's like, what is the cost of OpenAI's PhD model? What's the cost of OpenAI's PhD model for the year? Oh my gosh. Okay, it was way more than what I thought. Sorry. I thought it was like $10,000 for the year. It's $20,000 per month. So it's $240,000 for the year. Okay, that's significantly more than like what I pay for Gemini Pro, which is $20 a month or something. All right. So this is the idea of the whole land, expand, demand. Is OpenAI believes that they have landed, they have expanded, and they probably have, and now they can price jack because they already got everybody like set up. They already have the account. People are using it, or they were, and so now you just like slowly turn the heat up. Now, this works, I think, if you really have market dominance, but the problem is OpenAI doesn't, and I think they're losing more and more of market dominance, kind of like every day, because their technology, at least based on what I understand, is not notably disruptive. That they were principally just like throwing a lot of money at something and brute forcing it, right? Like, they didn't invent Transformers. Google Brain did that. They were one of the first, I want to give credit where credit's due. They were one of the first companies to deploy large language models in production quality systems that had easy to use user interfaces, which is why I think they took the world by storm in Q3, Q4 of like 2022. Right when ChatGPT first came out and everybody was kind of like losing their mind, they were in a really strong market position from at that point. And things, I think, maybe they climbed a little bit through 2023, but I think since then they've been slowly, or maybe largely on the decline. Okay, so this is a little bit more background just to get at the point that this guy's talking about Google poaching. Hey, Ivan, you missed the fact that we're doing this essentially deep dive to try to understand what's going on with the Windsurf deal and how it happened. And so we watched this. Essentially, we watched this CNBC video, super short video, which describes the details, but it's doing it in a very sort of skin deep, superficial analysis. And I'm doing a deeper dive explaining the complexities of why Windsurf going with OpenAI is not a great deal, why it may have fallen apart, and why Google makes more sense for Windsurf.